All right, I would like to welcome everyone to Radio Jaguar, Mission Cultural Center's radio. We are launching this incredible podcast, and we are starting our podcast with historical figures. And today we have two of the founders of Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts. And I am going to let them introduce themselves or introduce one another. So let's start with Gilberto. Can you please introduce Alfonso?
Hello, my name is Romeo Gilberto Osorio, and I'm the co-founder of the Mission Cultural Center and the founder of the gallery, Galeria Museo. And to my right is Alfonso Maciel, who was also one of the co-founders and the second director of the center, but he was also the founder of the Mission Graphics, the original
Mission Gráfica.
Mission Gráfica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which by the way, was called the Graphics Committee.
The Graphics Committee. Now let's start with, Alfonso, it's a pleasure to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started, how the Graphics Committee got started, and
Okay.
tell us the story.
Well, actually, it all just happened organically. You know, so somebody once said, "Oh, I admire the vision you guys had." Had no vision. Actually, we were just reacting. There was no.
And
there
what
was
were
no
you
master
reacting
plan.
to? What were you reacting to? What was happening? What year was this, first of all?
1977.
So in 1977, what was the political climate in San Francisco in arts and culture? What was happening?
Okay. Well, there was the only term I can apply to it is effervescence. I mean, you can feel it in the air. There was just some spontaneous artistic manifestations all over the place, from poetry to music to visual arts, and it was all coming together with enormous wave of support for the liberation movements in Latin America. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of like a catalyst that kind of educated, politicized
Community.
The community, and the opening of the center and the openness of the center was a very important factor to garner the incredible amount of community support that the center got from the get-go.
So right from the beginning, there was community support.
Yes.
So it was supported because was San Francisco open to people of color in the arts? I mean, you know, were we active in museums and symphony halls, or what was happening during that time?
That was precisely the point. The point it was that we were being ignored. And as students of ethnic studies in San Francisco State, the city could co-opt the neighborhood arts program to mediatize the situation of this post-war and during the war in Vietnam, and but they did not want to commit themselves to the arts. And galleries is the concentration of theaters, largest concentration of theaters in a community, not only in San Francisco but in the United States. You know, not only the Mission Cultural Center, but La Galería La Raza, Laza Graphics.
So there was an explosion of arts and cultural centers in the Mission because there was no representation in mainstream museums, mainstream theaters.
Exactly.
People of color were ignored. Excuse me, they didn't have a space. So that's why the Mission Cultural Center probably received tons of support from the beginning, because there were many artists who were being ignored and they didn't have a home.
Exactly.
So tell me about the home that you helped create for artists in the 70s at Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts, specifically Mission Gráfica. How did that happen?
Well, we had the first meeting of the participants in the opening of the cultural center, and we started divvying up roles. And since I had been active in graphics, I was assigned the role
Of setting it up.
Of setting it up, yeah.
So you set up a print shop.
So, well, actually, there was just this empty space, and we kind of all chose what spaces we wanted. This one had more or less good light because it has windows, and so I said, well, this would be the graphics department. So we started by sanding the floors, and Oscar, my brother, who was the building manager, started building up the walls, and then we improvised some tables, and then even before the tables were finished, the workshops had already begun, and it just kept on mushrooming. Yes. Supposedly the center was closed by 10 o'clock at night, but at 2 o'clock in the morning you could see the activity going on. The graphics department was busy pretty much 24 hours a day.
And what did you do there? I mean, young audiences today think of graphics as maybe graphic design, digital design, but you're not talking about that type of graphics. How was Gráfica back then in the 70s? What was it like?
Well, for one thing, as far as the images were concerned, we would use X-Acto knives and Rubylith. A lot of people may not know what Rubylith is, but we drew with cutting knives on Rubylith to create screens for silk screen prints. That was one aspect of it. Another aspect was there was a lot of graphics production per se, such as we did 3 poetry books for Editorial Pochoche. We used to put together the layouts for El Pulgarcito, which was a newspaper supporting the movement in El Salvador. The Gaceta Sandinista, which was doing the same for the Nicaraguan side of things, and at one point even El Tecolote was laying out in our facilities.
So you were actually printing newspapers, books, leaflets, and posters.
Yeah.
So you were the print shop for the community, art for the people, printing for the people.
Yeah. And that is something that marked me for life. I can't. Even now, 45 years later, I can't think of art unless it's it has a public aspect to it. Like for me, public art is where it's at. Of course, back then, a nice old man with a tie and everything,
right,
came out and saying that if art said something or meant something, it wasn't art. Well, bullshit.
For you, it meant art needed to connect to the people, to a cause, to the public. So before my novio Prince, who's the artist of social change, came out, you were around, Alfonso. Oh my God! So you're the artist for social change. Artist for social change. That's what we had at Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts. Right. That's amazing. And where did you get the equipment? It was hard enough to get the building,
Yes,
and it was hard enough to make the building suitable for a cultural center. Tell me about the equipment and how that came to be.
Ralph Maradiaga, who was then a teacher at State College in Silkscreen, used to teach a class of improvising silkscreen, as like Rauschenberg and Warhol, in that sense. And so what happened is that we tried to improvise in everything. Anything that had a glass was a table, etc., etc. And we did it sometimes without. We don't even know how the things came out.
So you used whatever you had available.
Exactly.
So you by any means necessary, you used whatever was available to you to create art for the people, for the cause, and make it happen.
And not only that, but by the needs of the events.
Mm-hmm.
There were when we opened the center, we opened it for the community without charge or anything, and so. But each one of them needed propaganda, otherwise people wouldn't know. So Alfonso would take care of that.
So for every event, they would go to Gráfica, and you would make the posters for all the different events that occurred in the mission. And I saw posters in the archive. Not only did you create posters for local events in San Francisco, you created posters for events in other parts of the world. Can you tell me about that?
Well, particularly around the Central American movements, I think that we were very active in that. And there's one poster in particular that stands out in my mind's eye. It's a light brown background, and it's printed in black and red, and it's made to look like a wood block print. Mm-hmm. Although it was the famous Rubelef.
The Rubelef.
Yeah. And that image, that poster was so successful that soon I got that was for an event at the Mission Cultural Center. Then they called me from LA, said, we're having a Sandinista support event over here. Can we use the image? I said, of course you can use it. Then later on they had one in Chicago. They used it there too. And then after the Somoza dictatorship was ousted, that image was used for about a year as the sign-off image for Sandinista television.
Wow.
And it was also used as a cover of a booklet on agrarian reform by Comandante Jaime Willock. So I said, my goodness, I never expected it to have that kind of diffusion, but it just went all over the place.
But when you make art for the people, it spreads. And that one of the things that I found really interesting as I was looking through the archives is that many of the prints were not signed, and they weren't signed because it was a collaborative process. Artists maybe somebody would come up with the idea of the image, and then maybe somebody else would help with the layout, and someone else would come in and print. So there was a true community collaborative spirit amongst artists that were creating art for the people. It didn't belong to them, it belonged to the world. Okay. And that's very powerful, very powerful. And I believe that's what marked you.
It did although I was already marked by public art. As it turns out, the very first time in my life that I was conscious that there was something called art, I must have been about 6 years old. My mom took me to the Hospicio Cabañas in Guadalajara, which is very famous, where the very famous Jose Clemente Orozco mural of the Men in Flames. But at that time, it was still, the mural, of course, was there, but it was still functioning as an orphanage. And my mom, every time we came to Guadalajara from my hometown, which is Tamazula, Jalisco, she would take a donation to the nuns that run the orphanage. So we went under this thing. It just terrified me. I was just totally terrified. By the time we came out and we had to go under that thing again, I just remember grabbing onto my mom's hand and it crossing my eyes. I couldn't looking down. I couldn't stand looking at that horrible thing. And so, yeah.
It marked you.
It marked me. I mean, I was aware. I know exactly the moment I was aware of art.
So the impact of art in public spaces and how it impacts you personally. So what's beautiful and what I find interesting is that, here we were in the 70s as people of color, not being ignored by main galleries, by museums, but yet art was all around us. Mm-hmm. And art was being seen. The art for the people was being seen by everyone in the streets, because these posters were put on the streets. They were promoting events. It was telling the story of a people, and these posters are phenomenal because they they have a political content. They have they speak. They tell a story, like without words. You just look at the image, and it speaks to the people.
And a very high quality.
And a very high quality art. I'm sure that you were not aware back then that you were creating history, that you were pioneers and history makers.
It was my surprise. The last one time I went to the Museum of Modern Art, and there was a Super 8 projection of I don't know who the artist is, but it's an archives over there, which documents all those posters that were plastered throughout the community. And he did it for about 5 or 6 years. And some of his are there, some of mine works are there from El Salvador, and all. And to me, it's, hey, look, there I am.
I know these the original archives are now, they're documented and they're in the Library of Congress. So you could see a lot of the work of the early work there in the Library of Congress, and we have a lot of the Mission Gráfica artists that are now also publishing a book to tell the story. And there's still, I think we have a lot of stories to tell, and I am asking the community and those that are listening for support. We are raising money so that we could document our history and tell our stories. It's very important that, just like we created our own cultural center of the arts because we were being ignored, it's important to write our own books because we're also being ignored in academia and in other areas. So if we don't tell our own people's history, then who's going to tell it, right? So now, Alfonso, how many years were you there at Mission Cultural Center? At what point, when did you start? When did you leave?
Well, I started right at from the organizational stages to the opening, and then through the creation of the graphics department. Then about a year after that, Alejandro Murguia, who was the first director of the center, announced he was leaving the post, and we needed to elect a new director. So somebody tossed my name, and everybody agreed, and by acclamation, I was.
You became the director.
I became the director. Yeah, I got. Como se dice en español, me saqué el tigre en la rifa.
Bueno, pues a ti te eligieron. So when you became the director, what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome? I know that I faced quite a few challenges in March of 2022. What were the challenges that you faced when you became the executive director?
Starting by the broken plate glass windows on the front of the building, which were boarded up, and it gave it a kind of a raunchy, almost dangerous look. There was no money for absolutely anything. In fact, the budget that the Neighborhood Arts Program, under which the Mission Cultural Center operated in the beginning stages, was so small that there was. You could count it in the hundreds, not in the thousands.
Wow.
That was for discretionary use. The rest of it was CIDA employees. The CIDA Arts Program was administered through the Neighborhood Arts Program, and we got at least a dozen workers, I would say, right? That plus the fact that the youth diversion program,
the diversion
program, from Juvie, they would place kids that needed to do community service, and who themselves became artists. I mean, they were bitten by the bug, and and not only they did the community service hours they needed to do for the court, but they stayed.
They continued to do artwork.
They continued to do.
And many of them became established artists.
Well, there's one case in particular that comes to mind, where Carlos Cordova has a lot to do with it. There was Cookie Gonzalez.
Cookie Gonzalez, and he's amazing.
He is amazing. He was graffitiing on the back wall of the center in Osage Alley, and Carlos comes out and he doesn't run him away or he doesn't scold him. He talks to him and invites him to the center and helps him join the movement, and became a respected muralist in his own right.
Yes.
He went on to get an education. He got his BA and his MA in social service, and recently retired from public service. I mean,
right, and he's still making murals.
Story.
He's still making murals and creating art. And
Yes.
Cookie Gonzalez is one of our artists that we're very proud of, and he's also making music.
Yes, oh yes, he does. Another anecdote that is kind of is good to note. A few years ago, my son invited my wife Monica and I to a Santana concert in Shoreline, and I said, "This I used to go to Santana concerts when I was young. Now my son is inviting me to a Santana concert. We're going together. This is just so cool." You know? And we are in this beautiful venue, which is the Shoreline, and during the intermission, it seems that Carl Perazzo spotted me in the audience, and he came down and said hello and told my son that today you paid good money to come and hear us play, but I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Mission Cultural Center where I got my start. And I just
Now it's amazing because a lot of the musicians of the Carlos Santana band taught and played and learned,
Right.
there at the Cultural Center. Can you tell me a little bit about the connection of Carlos Santana and his band and the Mission Cultural Center? There's a big history there.
Well,
Cuéntenme.
basically, Carlos Santana comes at the second stage of the center. After they rebuild it for fire and all those things, a new administration came because he was already in the Arts Commission, and he started to finance, gave a grant for graphics to develop. And people like Michael Roman and other people develop into the thing. And then René Castro organized a retrospective of his work, which includes many artists from the Mission in silkscreen, and a concert, and that was how Santana became really excited, especially in the sense of the musicians, what he was talking about, because he had recruited many people. We used to have mano a mano between Scoviro and Chepito Arias, let's say.
I remember, yes.
Yeah,
Chepito still walks around the Mission, very proud of his work.
And any let's say, any group that came from Cuba, Nicaragua, El Salvador, or Mexico, they would play in the big venues, but they wanted to. It was the movement was so powerful in the Mission that they wanted to present themselves over there. So we opened the center for them, and there was Gavino Palomari, David Bigletti, Grupo Moncada. Everybody went through
Jose
there.
de Molina.
Without paying more.
When I look at the archives and I see the historical figures that went through the Mission Cultural Center, it's amazing. I mean, you had Mercedes Sosa there. Just the public figures
Ernesto
that went.
Cardenal.
Ernesto Cardenal was there. Like all my
Rigoberta
heroes.
Menchú.
Rigoberta Menchú. I'm like, wow, that was amazing. So that just tells you about the power of people coming together for a cause, to support social causes and to support the movement that was so vibrant throughout Latin America and the United States. But the Mission Cultural Center was that hub. And I think what was beautiful about it then and what's beautiful about it now is that we have access to a studio, a Gráfica studio. We have access to a galeria. We have access to a theater. And the fact that you were all visionaries and you said, we're going to need all of it. We have studios. Those are still very difficult assets for us to access. And there it is for anybody in the community to use. back then and now.
It was used, all right.
And it was fully utilized, and I hope that it continues to be utilized, and that we improve and remodel things so that we have a renewed sense of pride and use in these amazing spaces that housed some of the greatest artists and leaders of our time.
Yes.
So can you tell me now I'm going to move away from you, and I'm going to go to the Galeria to tell me, Gilberto, what role did you play in the development and growth of the Mission Cultural Center?
When we took the art commission and everything for them to give us the money to buy the center, and since they didn't want to open it because it didn't fulfill all the requirements for a safety place to
The
be.
building safety codes.
Anyway, we installed the key, we opened the thing, and we called the community. But everyone that came to those meetings saw themselves through their own perspective. They wanted to be a child care center, they wanted to be a rehab center, they wanted all these things, and there were practically conflicts, people fighting in the main front. But we had chosen it because we thought we visited about 10 different places that we could do it. But for us, 24th Street, BART. Mm-hmm. The third floor, perfect for a theater. The second floor, perfect for a gallery. And where they used to store all the furniture from the original store that was there, was on top. That was the music, dance, and graphics that we developed. So after the second or third meeting that we couldn't come to any conclusion or to any agreement, I simply brought the situation about. Look, we decided this. Instead of us fighting for this thing, whoever wants to come, who is in theater, stay here. Whoever is interested in visual arts, second floor. And so and whoever wants in poetry, Inti Raimi, which is now
the gallery.
Part of the gallery. The gallery was where your office is there, was up to there, but it was a special sort of show. And then on top it will be music, so everybody got together, and since there was no money, we started to say, well, what we have to do is we have to sand the floors here and everything's going to be voluntary because we don't have any money. We're going to go to the community and ask for contributions and everything, maybe borrow a sander or something, and that's basically it. And so people started to fade away. But there was a hardcore of people that was truly interested in it, and we started the work, and it was 100% voluntary.
Wow. That's true community building and development, and that's why maybe the center is so loved, because so many people put their own time and personal sacrifice. Everybody left a little bit of themselves
and they feel
in
connection.
That center. And I know that when people talk about the Mission Cultural Center, they talk about it with love, like with love. And I think the love comes from giving of yourself, putting something of yourself in it, giving back to it, and it gave back to them. Exactly. I don't know anybody that has gone there that doesn't have this reciprocal relationship where I gave to the center, but the center gave me life. I mean, I call the Mission Cultural Center the hospital of the soul, because with COVID, all of the funding priorities are for hospitals and social services, which is very much needed. But you know what? Our soul also needs healing. And arts and culture is so important that we need to fund it. We need it in our community. We need to drink cultura. We need to nourish ourselves with cultura, because cultura cura. And I believe that the Mission Cultural Center is the hospital of the soul. And there's this, just like back in that time, there was a lot of need for us to heal from the war in Vietnam, from all the different civil war movements in Latin America. There was so much turmoil, people immigrating, coming out of brutal, traumatic experiences. Today in 2022, we are coming out of a traumatic event, a pandemic.
Yep, that's right.
And just like in the 1970s, we needed a safe place today we need a safe place to heal. And I'm so happy that you're both here to be able to share that story. Is there any other anecdotes or history that you would like to make sure is clarified and put on the record?
There's something I'd like to bring out. The spaces of the center were so large that most regular size art pieces would just get lost. So I guess we decided to fill the place up with large scale graphics. So I developed this series of images. We call them the sábanas, bed sheets. Because actually that's what they were. We'd go to Salvation Army and purchase used bed sheets, and then find a couple pieces of wood to make a stand. And then would go to Last's Paint. I don't know if it still exists. It used to be a local paint company. What's it? We first because we last.
We're first because we last. Last Paints in the Mission.
They would donate all the paint that we ever needed to do this kind of work. So it was pretty much like guerrilla art. Used bed sheets, found wood, and donated house paint to create this sábanas, which had images such as Lucio Cabañas, Lolita Lebrón, Otto René Castillo. ¿Quién más estaba?
Farundo Martí.
No, he didn't have
No, pero
Roque Dalton. También Rigoberto López Pérez. So these huge images hung in there like revolutionary saints, Los Santos.
Oh, so they were on sheets and they were hanging.
They were hanging
so they
from
were
the
beautiful,
walls.
beautiful pieces.
Yeah.
That's actually.
And when
very cool idea.
like in the gallery, we had a policy. The gallery is yours, fill it up, and it was big enough to do retrospectives, and we did. Carlos Loarca and other people came over, and even from New Mexico and Brazil and everything, Carciliano Jr., all these things. And so the only thing that I want is that you live in the archive. We put the name that I adopted for it was Piñara Galería Museo.
Galería Museo. I
So
love that.
what we needed was to you can have this, and if you want to sell whatever it is. But I would like you to donate one for the museum, so that when we don't have since it was so large, when we don't have a gallery setup, we'll take one and we'll put the permanent collection. When they close, that disappeared.
I haven't seen the bed
I even
sheets.
did a mural of 8 large plastic, because I work in polyester resins and everything. But that was at the entrance. That disappeared. Everything disappears once it gets into the politics.
It disappears.
It dies.
Yes.
Okay. Well, this has been a pleasure talking to both of you, and I'm so glad that you're here. And I want you to know that the Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts will always be your home. That I know what it takes to sacrifice, the personal sacrifice it takes to give that place love. You gave it a lot of love. You gave it life.
Certainly did.
And it's still living and moving forward. And we need everybody's support. This is the 45th year anniversary, and I want it to continue on for another century. But we need funds as usual. We need creative artists. We need people who are generous with their time and their money to support this cause. So if you are interested in supporting Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts, you can go to our website, missionculturalcenter.org, and you can find out more information, or just stop by and say, I'm here to help. I'm here to volunteer. We still need to fix Gráfica. We need carpenters who can put in a waterproof floor. We need to replace our dance studio floors so we can have beautiful hardwood floors. We need, the gallery needs a new studio lights. We need our floors to be refinished. The place continues to need a lot of love. And just like you took it upon yourselves to use whatever you had to create things, we are still in need of that, because I think that's what it was born to do. I think the Mission Cultural Center was by, for, and about the people.
And it's always a work in progress.
And it's always a work in progress, and it's going to continue to be by, for, and about the people. But in order for that to continue, we need the people to give back.
Yeah.
So thank you for all of that you gave. Thank you. And we have a Day of the Dead show opening. Tomorrow we have a VIP preview dinner and concert, and we are featuring one of your installations. Okay. It's a very powerful installation. I had to kind of put it off in an area where people are actually prepared to go in and see it, because it makes a very strong statement. Do you want to talk a little bit about your art piece?
Well, basically after the center closed, after 92, 93 with gentrification and everything, and then everything came down, even Galeria La Raza, all these people closed. I opened up a studio gallery. It was called Piñata Art, and I trained myself to do piñatas because I traveled through Central America learning all this paper mache and things like that when I was in the university, and I started to incorporate that into. My intention was to learn the technique and project it into the gallery. And so there was a massacre during the war in El Salvador that created actually the war, because it was there was a massacre of 147 kids. They had killed already 800 of the adults, but they didn't know what to do with them. So they put them in the local church, which was adobe, and they enclosed it. The rest of the people, they left there in the countryside to their fate, and animals and everything, and the weather sort of disappeared them. But this one, after the war, was unearthed, and they found out that there were 147 kids that were piled up in a corner and imploded, dead. But that gave la masacre del Mozote justified the fact that the United States had denied that massacre so that they could project the war for and finance it for 10 years more, and 100,000 more killed. And so for me, when the forensic team was unearthing this, the idea came up, what will that look the last moment before they imploded it? All these kids piled up in a corner. And so I did 147 piñatas and the size of the trees, and piled them up in the corner, and that's what it's called. The Volume of Massacre, El Mozote.
It is a very powerful installation that you will be able to see when you go to this year's Day of the Dead show, which is entitled Siempre Vivirás en mi corazón. You will always live in my heart. You know, in Mexico, there's 3 deaths. There's the first one when you physically die. The second one when they bury you. But the real death is the third death, when you're forgotten.
Yeah.
And so I am very pleased that we are honoring people that are often forgotten, especially the children who were massacred in El Salvador. And what year did that occur?
1981.
1981 is the massacre of El Mozote.
This is the 41st
And
anniversary.
it's important to remember, not just our loved ones, but those that died a preventable death, because those deaths were preventable.
Absolutely.
Had there not been guns, those deaths were preventable. Violence at the hands of, the death at the hands of a gun is preventable. And it's important that we remember the people that we lost, the children that we lost, and that we keep their memory alive, and that we don't forget, because it's happening over and over again. Next to your exhibit, there's another installation by Adrian Arias, and he honors the children that were killed in Uvalde, in Texas, during the massacre there.
Yeah.
So these massacres of children continue to happen today, and it's something that we can prevent. So once again, thank you for your public art. Thank you for the social consciousness that is created through your art. Concientización, liberación, arte para el cambio social. That's what we're about. So thank you everyone for coming to our show of Radio Jaguar.